Ascension News, Embracing 5D Wealth Consciousness. The opposite of abundance is scarcity, or as I call it, scarcity. Scarcity is another term for low-frequency 3D living. How do I know about this kind of living consciousness? Well, I was introduced to it by my family, but my real initiation came much later. In my early 20s, I began working in international banking in the City of London, staying for around a decade, leaving in my late 20s in 1987. To be honest, I was a very bad fit. I never really believed in the work I was doing. I was there because I didn't know what else to do, and there was also a golden cage of financial benefits closing around me. This was a painful time where I felt I was a round peg being squeezed into a very square hole. Ethics was not something much talked about in the banking world. I remember on a number of occasions raising concerns about some of the projects the bank was involved in. And I was told by most of my colleagues just to forget these concerns, forget this idea of social justice, focus on my work, focus on the bonus at the end of the year. None of this really worked for me. You see, I never really cared much about shareholders or profits. I knew in my heart I needed to do something else, but with a young family to support, this was not enough. Eventually I hit a crisis and energetically hit the wall. I took a year off sick to convalesce, then resigned. My soul was calling me to adventure, and I could no longer resist the calling. I had no idea where this would lead, but looking back, leaving the bank was one of the best decisions I'd ever made. I'm certain if I had stayed there, I would be dead or mad by now. After leaving the 3D world of banking, I entered the more politically left-wing world of local government. This was an interesting journey, but to fast forward, after 10 years there, I left my job to finally leave the 3D matrix of work behind for good. I had been exploring different spiritual paths for several years, and the only area not aligned with my spiritual life was how I earned or generated money. After a few adventures in different work settings, I became a director of a not-for-profit organisation called Alternatives. This was in 2000. Alternatives hosts spiritual authors for talks, workshops and retreats. Wonderful time there, and stayed as a director for 13 years. At the beginning it was challenging because the organisation was not in great financial shape. And I was only beginning to just then learn how spirituality, business and money really work together. This was an incredible learning curve, and I left the organisation in great financial shape and still doing very well. I left at the winter solstice of 2012 to devote my time and energy to my own ascension process and my own ascension business. This experience continues to be a journey of a lifetime. The nature of the universe is abundant. How do I know this? Well, just notice the sun, its radiance of light and energy that constantly shines. This radiance allows life on this planet to flourish. You may have noticed there's no corporation anywhere sending you a monthly invoice for this gorgeous gift. This is just one example of the generosity of nature. For another, think of the sunflower seed. Under the right conditions, a seed will produce a gorgeous flower that in turn will produce many hundreds, perhaps even thousands of seeds. These seeds will in turn go on to produce many fields of flowers. We live in an abundant universe, even though we still have a foot in the density of the 3D world. The 3D matrix would have us believe that scarcity is a natural order of things. This is something that most economists believe, of course. And the financial system is set up so abundance equals money, which is a finite commodity. From a spiritual point of view, money is energy, and energy follows belief, intention and vision. Money as energy is attracted to certain frequencies and repelled by others. In 3D, money is attracted to those who desire it the most, who value it the most, who intend to have it the most, and who chase it the most. Now the planet is ascending and the money game is changing. More and more, money is attracted to individuals and enterprises with vision and energy that truly uplift the planet and uplift others. The internet has changed the way the world does business. It's revolutionized many industries, such as publishing and music. Even though the world is changing and many individuals and enterprises are doing great work, we are not out of the intense gravitational pull of the old 3D scarcity financial system just yet. Consciousness is creative, and since most of the global population feel disenfranchised from the abundance of the earth, this helps keep the 3D matrix of fear, separation and control very much aligned. I know from working in the system and also from my experience of being the receiving end of the system, this generates not only scarcity consciousness on the planet, but it's also responsible for many of the major problems we face, such as pollution and war. In this outgoing 3D matrix, the monetary system locks billions of people into debt, anxiety, consumerism, which is a very low frequency consciousness that blocks our ability to know our true spiritual nature. Money itself is not the problem. The system that controls and manipulates monetary flows is the real problem. And this system could be viewed metaphorically as a great pyramidal structure, with a small group of people, a very small group of people at the top, reaping most of the rewards, while many at the lower levels struggle to simply survive. A very few people at the top own a vastly disproportionate percentage of the global wealth. Because of the time we're in and the light impacting the planet, this way of living is going to change. The financial system as it currently stands is unjust, destructive, alien to human nature and to every living kingdom on the planet. I'm sure that you are reading this because you know there is something very wrong here. The system is in dire need of transformation, otherwise it will simply collapse, or partially collapse, either of which will force a new and more just, equitable way of living on the world. Further down the timeline, I believe, it's destined that the whole money system will be totally reimagined, transformed, and perhaps even got away with altogether. The current monetary system has been referred by some people as a Babylonian slave money magic system. This will give you a clue of how long ago it was created. Controlling money gives many advantages. Controlling money flow allows an unprecedented ability to control the masses. A small group of people can then control the governments of the world. This small group has tremendous power, and this power has been in place for as long as systems have sought to rule. Many well-meaning people have tried to challenge this way of doing things. For example, when Julius Caesar first came to power in ancient Rome, one of the biggest challenges he faced was a mountain of debt, causing social unrest, poverty and civil war. There was a distinct lack of coinage, as people were hoarding currency. Julius Caesar ended the unrest by providing free rent for all citizens for a year, limiting how much currency could be kept per citizen, and cancelling all interest payments due since the outbreak of civil war. Many were jubilant, but not everyone was happy, of course. The money changers had suddenly lost control of a very lucrative business, but this would not be the case for long. Julius Caesar was assassinated. Corruption then returned. Taxation increased, businesses failed, citizens lost homes and lands, poverty became the norm. Does this sound familiar? In the 1960s, John Kennedy attempted to change the American financial system. On June 4, 1963, John F. Kennedy signed an executive order calling for the issuance of currency through the US Treasury rather than the Federal Reserve System. He also gave a radical speech about the dangers of secret societies in America, which also sealed his fate. He was assassinated shortly afterwards. Scarcity is created by conditioning and fear-based programs that become lodged deep within the subconscious mind. Such programs, based on false beliefs about the nature of reality, have passed down the generations. For instance, my parents went through rationing in World War II as children, and my mother continued to act as if rationing would come back at any moment. She did this by storing lots of tinned food in her kitchen cupboards. She did it up to the time she passed over to the other side. So scarcity programs can be passed down the bloodline. We may feel such programs being triggered whenever we take a step to move out of systemic control. Scarcity programs can also come from past life experiences. Just think of a lifetime in a monastery where you've taken vows of poverty out of a belief that money is bad or evil. Think of the opposite kind of experience where you had lots of money and as a result your family were robbed or killed. Programs in the bloodline and from past lives can of course be cleared and neutralized. People are more easily controlled when they're in fear or survival mode. I know from personal experience that every time I came to a major choice point in my life, one where I felt invited by Spirit to take a step forward, a step out of my familiarity zone, it came with a sense of fear or anxiety. How would I pay the mortgage? How could I afford to eat? What would become of me? What if it all goes badly wrong? All of these thoughts were one way or another associated with beliefs around money.
Alright, some
My
people
worst
can't
case
imagine
scenario
leaving
was
home
a deep fear
without
of homelessness. When I was at one particularly powerful choice point back in the 90s, I remember scouting around local parks, looking for cozy spots to sleep, should the worst come to the worst. It never happened, of course. Scarcity consciousness creates an almost hypnotic compulsion to accumulate money or goods, or to shop in order to stay safe, feel good or worthy. Scarcity.
How did this hammer get into 40 million diseases? But it doesn't stop there.
The ancient DNA they gathered does not match modern human DNA.
Self-worth is based
Our
on how much
thoughts
money you
can
earn.
alter physical phenomena.
Beginning in 1954, we figured out zero point. There was a high.
In Part 1 of Secrets of the Solar Lords, we explored the philosophy of hylozoism, which states the entire cosmos is a singular living system composed of a myriad of lesser lives, which we observe as galaxies, constellations, stars, planets, and humans, as well as all other lesser lives. However, at any level, each unit of life is an entire system unto itself, yet still a part of the greater system in which it exists. The occult term used to define this spiritual center within any unit of life is a logos, or the point from which all consciousness and energy emerges into form. Therefore, behind every life, whether microcosmic or macrocosmic, is a logos, a spiritual center gradually descending into more material planes of form while unfolding into its next state of expression, as the polarity between matter and spirit is equilibrated. The solar logos is the great heavenly man, and each planet is but a participant within his stupendous project, which we call the solar system. It is this divine consciousness of this logos that holds the worlds into form through sound, light, and vibration, thereby causing the lesser and greater Davic or angelic lives to fuse together into cohesion, creating the natural world and the music of the spheres. We also explored the idea of the evolution of consciousness as it passes through all living forms within one kingdom to the next, and the unique characteristics consciousness takes when passing into the human form. It is within human consciousness where we find the intense struggle between light and darkness. The struggle continues until the final day of liberation, when spirit is released from the confines of form into a fully self-conscious and self-realized spark of divinity. In Part 2 of Secrets of the Solar Lords, we will look more closely at the unique tapestry of planetary evolution and the great volunteers who have assisted in its work, and the odd karma it has inherited from past failures and the residue of even older systems, resulting in a portion of humanity becoming the Great Orphan. Om, said the Almighty One, thus all came into manifestation. As the universal spirit progresses forward, it manifests cyclically through periods of involution and evolution. Involution is the process whereby spirit or energy gradually becomes more materialized into concrete forms, whereas evolution is the opposite, where matter is spiritualized back into the formless worlds of energy. All greater and lesser lives follow this natural ebb and flow, both human and planetary alike. The Earth's scheme is just now coming out of the densest point in its evolution, and the pendulum now swings upward towards spirit, having sunk into the deepest point of matter. Looking at human evolution from a more broad perspective, that is, from the view of the esoteric philosophy, we can see that all kingdoms of nature are layers of consciousness within the planetary logos. Each of the 7 kingdoms of nature is an expression of our planetary life. As the cyclical motion of the logos passes through our planetary life, these energies move through cycles called rounds or periods of activity where our human monad or spirit incarnates from the lowest levels of matter into the highest spiritual kingdoms. In the human kingdom, this is symbolized as the outbreathing, incarnating, and the inbreathing, disincarnating of the human soul, or at a cosmic level, the expansion and contraction of the universe, symbolized as the Great Breath.
Spirals of space, there are winding passages which lead directly from one system to another, and which correspond to the nervous system of the human body, whereby impacts upon one portion of the body have the repercussion through the entire organism. For each nebular system, there is a nebular heart and brain, the heart controlling the currents which feed the great solar systems with their myriad dependent planets, and the brain carrying and controlling the electrical energy of the system and interweaving the units so that they respond as a whole to the will and intentions of the great cosmic mind behind it all. In other words, the heart heart center is magnetic, the mind center electric. Blood carries magnetism both in the microcosm and the macrocosm. The plasma within space carries the electrical fluids from system to system, similar to how red blood cells carry oxygen in the human bloodstream. In every system, life and evolution must be intelligently directed and governed by higher forms of intelligence. The challenges come when consciousness passes out of the animal form into the human, because it is here where individualized mind is created, and thus the dangers associated with free will in overstimulated elemental activity. Therefore, in any system, there exists the possibility of darkness consuming light, or light pervading darkness.
Eons ago, long before the Earth was formed, our planetary logos was incarnated upon another globe during a previous cycle of manifestation. Just as our own soul reincarnates through many different bodies, so too the planetary logos reincarnates through many different bodies, or planets. Several planets in our solar system, including the Earth, are still considered non-sacred, meaning on their own high level they have yet to achieve a certain cosmic initiation. Therefore, they have not yet perfected their ability to divinely express themselves. Just as humans may stumble along the way before reaching integration with their higher nature, so too a planetary logos is on a journey of integration with its higher nature. Hence, there have been many setbacks or errors throughout its history. Specifically, there was a major setback during a previous cycle called the moon chain, of which the physical moon is but a remnant and reminder today. One could say that the moon is a planetary ghost from a bygone age. In that earlier cycle, many eons ago, there was a premature blending of certain forces which caused a major distortion within the human and deva forms that were incarnated at that time. It is said that it was due to misplaced sexual energy, but not a lot of concrete information has been given to us by the hierarchy. In short, disaster resulted, and the planetary logos had to withdraw its life essence from that body, while the solar logos was forced to abruptly intervene in order to offset the danger and the disaster as much as possible. Afterwards, the human souls from that planet were put into a kind of suspended state, or pralaya, where they would wait until a future cycle permitted them to reincarnate in order to finish their evolution. That future cycle was our Earth, specifically during the middle of the Atlantean moon race, and as a result, there are now two primary groups of souls here: the older souls from the moon chain and the younger souls from our Earth chain. This has caused much disruption and many challenges throughout history, and in this Initially, there was a clear distinction between the two groups, but over the eons, they have slowly integrated and become more harmonized together, even though there is still much more balance to be had. And much of the turmoil here on Earth can be traced back to that failure on the moon chain. For Earth did not only adopt the humans and Devas from the moon chain, but we also adopted their lower elemental forces as well. The failure upon the moon chain caused a major setback for our planetary logos, and therefore it has fallen behind in its development. In fact, it is supposed to be at the same level of the Venusian scheme. So after the word of doom was uttered and the purpose of the plan diverted, the solar logos sent out a call and help was evoked. And the solar lords have worked with much haste in order to help coordinate those volunteers who came to help elevate our logos and speed up her progress here all those eons ago. The volunteers have come from many different systems and work on various planes, but the ones in charge and who operate on the highest level are from the Venusian chain, known as the Kumaras, or Lords of Flame. 108 Kumaras arrived nearly 21 million years ago when humanity individualized, but now only 7 remain. They will stay until the end of our current cycle or round, wherein the planetary ascension will occur as Earth becomes a sacred planet. Truly, the scale of sacrifice by these Kumaras to guide mankind from darkness to light is staggering when compared to mortal incarnation. Sanat Kumara, their leader, has descended from the highest planes in cosmos and stands in as the silent watcher of our planet, as he is a personal assistant to our solar logos. He is also known as the Ancient of Days, or the Youth of Endless Summers. He is the one initiator. Hence, Venus has taken on the responsibility of becoming Earth's tutor and helping her get back on the right track. Highest worlds of form connected with his planet gather the solar lords with their various ranks and routines. There too are the visiting lords with due prompt and ceremony. It is due to the odd and tragic history of our planet that so many from far away come as visitors. It is but natural that this great experiment, like nothing before seen in the solar realms, should evoke such curiosity and speculation. It may be of interest to understand the relations of the solar lords to the first Kumara and his assistants. Sanat Kumara is the regent of the planet in charge of planetary evolution. He and his council chambers at the planetary head center known as Shambhala and the Lodge of Masters are, as it were, tutors to men. They carry on the actual inner government and development of the kingdoms of nature, but they receive their orders from the solar lords, who act as counsel for the dominant lord during his incubacy. Each solar lord has charge of the distribution of the force of his constellation for the chain. The the Solar Lords are, in fact, in charge not only of the planet, but also of the chain and series of chains. In time, it is hoped that humans and devas of this planet can supervise the work for them, so far as this planet is concerned. This progresses each astrological age.
Pray not to the darkness, nor bribe the helpless God. Within yourself, deliverance must be sought. In the end, probably great strength and endurance will come to those human souls who achieve alone, and who, knowing the doom, have dared to enter the kingdom of earth. Yet help comes from those myriad volunteer souls who carry the light within, and who bring with them memory of radiance and of goodness, and who reach directly through the dark shadows of earth to the eternal. I and my Father are one. Who seeth me, seeth the Father. My burden is light. Come to me, ye who are weary, and I will give you rest. Again, the courageous volunteer seeking through his own strength and sacrifice and devotion to replace that missing strength of the earthly Father is not.
Humanity is a peculiar mixture of evolutionary cycles. Among the human souls that originated from our Earth chain, we are told in the esoteric philosophy that there is another soul group from an older system which is currently incarnated upon Earth in order to finish their soul's evolution. This interrupted evolution is said to be from the moon chain, which was a previous incarnation of our planetary logos, making their true origin quite mysterious. The humanity from the mysterious moon chain failure incarnated upon the Earth during the middle of Atlantis, causing a rare mishmash of evolutions, which also coincided with the deepest point of incarnation for our planetary logos. Currently, the majority of humans are still polarized in their emotional nature, or still considered Atlantean in their consciousness. The archetypal myth of the deluge, or the Great Flood, comes from the rise and demise of Atlantis. That race, even after receiving many divine gifts, essentially failed in its evolution, having succumbed to the destructive forces of materialism and the polarization between light and darkness. Therefore, the whole hierarchical effort since then has been to lead man's consciousness out of duality and to see and understand the inherent duality of all existence, so that mankind eventually may free itself from the fourth kingdom of nature. In all religions that teach the doctrine of duality, it has been emphasized that man must learn to recognize the deadly trap of association with the destructive forces of nature. This decision by humanity led to the great struggle which distinguished the Atlantean civilization, and which culminated in its destruction, referred to as the Great Flood. The struggle still persists, and the last two world wars were a recapitulation of the original Atlantean conflict, having laid dormant for some time. until precipitating onto the physical plane. During the time of Atlantis, the spiritual hierarchy directly contacted humanity and walked openly among mankind on the physical plane. It was also during this time that the first mystery schools were opened to aspiring students in order to teach the secrets of initiation. However, this ended with dire consequences, since the selfish ambitions of the emerging personality were stronger than the more altruistic impulses of the soul. Much of what was taught in the mystery schools was abused and misused. Having utilized the destructive forces of nature, there were semi-human entities that the black magicians of Atlantis summoned to assist them in their wars. They were demonic entities devoid of all virtue. These black magicians were originally some of the students in the Atlantean mystery schools, but turned to the darker side of life for selfish reasons of power after being consumed by materialistic desire and ambition, thus enslaving much of the masses who later followed their distorted wills. Since the vast majority of Atlanteans were emotionally polarized, the few who could think in the way we know today became very powerful in their ability to manipulate others, just like we see in today's world. In fact, in some ways, the Atlanteans were even more conscious on the emotional or astral plane than they were on the physical plane. This gave them more psychic abilities, but caused the elemental lives of the planet to be mistreated and abused, creating the two kingdoms to become improperly entangled. The karmic debt created from this error is still being realized today, spilling out into wars, violence, extreme materialistic desires, and religious feuds through deep-seated latent beliefs in the collective subconscious, rousing the demonic powers. Let it be understood that elementals are pure energy, existing in etheric matter and upon the lower astral and mental planes. They are involutionary in their nature when unguided and uncontrolled. They are the early aspects of force within the Deva kingdom, issued forth from the infinite, but as yet unevolved. However, all elementals are not demonic, but all demons are elementals. It is only when the lower animalistic qualities still latent within humans arise that the elementals become twisted and distorted, thus perverting them into an even lower and destructive demonic state. It has been the unconscious mixing of the two kingdoms that has caused confusion here, the contact too early with humans before the elementals were mellowed, and the ignorant association with humans before the time when they could be governed. It is also unfortunate for the elementals to step out of their line of work and to take on semblance of human actions before the due time. They are like children provided with sharp tools before they can safely use them. After the great Atlantean deluge, mankind came by air into the abode where evil incarnated. There the energies of the demonic forces twist and tangle, and are imprisoned within the lower subplanes. Some call this the domain of hell. Man's own evil nature and deeds have permitted the escape of some of those in prison. He loosed these to feed his own passions, and they have turned and rent him limb for limb. demons of the dark face and the demons of the fiery face both exist. Demons of the dark face fear light and are night-born offspring of evil magnetism and of the evil things which creep and crawl when the sun vanishes. They are easily controlled by fire, which cleanses and purifies. Imagine these as like the slimy, creeping things that dwell in the mud and ooze. They are earthborn and belong to the surface of our planet, progeny of man's own low level of evolution and evil desires and corruption. And due to the law of vibration, both the fiery and dark demons dwell in the lower subplanes. The demons of the fiery face are the original inhabitants of the planet, clean spawn of fire in their pristine state, yet unevolved and destructive. They have been freed from the inner chambers of the cinder by natural phenomena, but mainly by man's own curiosity and intervention. There are things which are not lawful. Unlawful not because evil, but because dangerous. Man has the right to challenge tradition, but not to desire the unlawful because forbidden. That is folly. Let him understand the reason, but not challenge fate by stupid disobedience. However, men learn slowly, and therefore, to safeguard the race, many things were decreed as unlawful by religious custom. The clear light of the sun acts as a cleanser to all evil of a certain type, but this evil is mostly man-made or connected in some way with bodily emanations. That is why evil magic must be performed at night. Most of this magic is governed by the moon and has to do with the body's secretions, sensations, and emanations. It is the product of watery influences, but the fiery demons have no fear of sunlight and thrive best where heat and light are most intense. However, they are often affected and controlled by water. Each element has its own mysteries. Much can be understood if one learns to segregate the expressions of evil into their corresponding elements, for their expression will conform to the element which governs them, and in turn will be controlled by its opposite element. Those things which belong to the surface of the earth, to water, and to the moon, to growing things and physical life, are controlled and cleansed by fire and the will. But the fiery demons who come from the central chambers of earth are controlled by water and personal magnetism. Here it might be of interest to the occultist how to differentiate between personal will and magnetism. Will is a fiery flame, an electrical power which bores and burns. Magnetism is a controlling force, similar to hypnotism and mesmerism. It paralyzes and congeals. One is connected with the earth. Demons from the fiery core of earth, having had no contact with human bodies, are not concerned with noisome black magic like voodooism and the like. They are rather the flaming destruction which fires the mind to madness, illustrated in mob violence, fanaticism, and wrath. Whereas demons of the dark face fester in man's subconscious and blister his psyche while menacing those with weaker wills. In general, men follow the line of will, women the line of magnetism, though these are often reversed in individual cases. Magnetism is akin to water, making things grow and glow. It is soothing, binding, and loving. Fire is near to will in its pure essence, but is often less balanced, less controlled, more unstable, and therefore more dangerous. It is the job of the occultist to learn how these forces and energies manifest through us, and therefore we each have the individual responsibility to manage and govern our own elementals by striving to integrate the personality and rise above the earthly forces, by contacting the deeper recesses of consciousness where shines the light of the soul. There the will compels us toward right action, and the calibrated magnetic power draws in those appropriate life opportunities of selfless service. This is white magic, and corresponds with the hierarchical effort upon the higher subplanes, and the line of work where the devas of our planet are found.
Over the entire planet, a veil hangs. It is the mist of ignorance which veils the planet from the radiance of the inner God. This planet has plunged too deep into matter, and her progress upward is painful and slow. Men with their sensitized imaginative spirits and minds have shared the lot of animals. The impetus of planetary rebellion overcame some of the laws of attraction and permitted spirit and matter to be too greatly separated, and the current or spark passing from one to the other has been dangerously feeble. At times it seemed as if it might cease altogether, the entire planet disintegrate, and the long experiment required to be begun again. But due to the titanic effort of the sons of men, the cycle turns upward. Slowly the world rolls from the bed of mud into which it has sank, and starts upon its journey toward the light. No wonder the whole system watches and prays. It is the turning point of the terrible struggle. Many who have been the cause of destruction in the past are now lending their efforts to the upward move. Many who have caused confusion and sorrow among the sons of light are now lending their powerful cooperation as they learn to reverence the new vision, which at last, after endless sacrifices, dawns upon their gaze. Now that the hour has come when the darkness lightens, many have come to assist at the birth of the new spiritual age. Before this, any attempt to help was useless, for they could not contact the low planes upon which humanity functioned. Until humanity had raised its consciousness upward, it could not grasp the hands reached down to succor it, and to lift it upward to the heights. Now that time has come, and throughout all the worlds the hallelujahs ring. Man, once again, may take his place by his brother's side at his Father's table and share in the glory of his presence. Alone he has achieved, and alone he has trod the path. Man's praises shall be sounded throughout all the worlds unto the end of time. Hosanna in the highest, and deepest gratitude to all those holy spirits who have shared in the toil and in the victory.
feel in the very atmosphere of the world the changes which are being wrought. Day by day in this new world, the forces of light are marshalling and seeking entry through every opening, through every crack and crevice, whereby the faintest beam of light may pass. As humanity begins to recover from the shock of the trials which lay behind, as we permit ourselves once more to respond to the holy and joyous harmony of the inner worlds, we will find our consciousness expanding and open to new understanding of the truth, or you might say new truths. However, they are not new. Truth stands majestic and immortal, eternal and unchangeable, but the mind perceives it from new angles of vision, from greater heights and depths, with deeper understanding. One may cognate a truth with the mind, but one does not truly know until it has irradiated one's whole being. O ye peoples of the planet, let us look up. Seek to open the gates that the golden dawn may enter, that the light of the spiritual sun may illumine our world. Time moves on. The end of darkness approaches. Let us make ready the highways of understanding, the holy footprints of the messengers of spirit to tread. May peace prevail.
There are other lines of force connected with this planet besides the human and elemental. Something remains to be said about the Deva or angelic kingdom, an evolution also undergoing unusual conditions in connection with their growth here. The Devas are the higher forms of elemental life, and thus, for the most part, have overcome the line of human development. And it is therefore customary for Devas to evolve through harmony, music, beauty, obedience, purity, and love. It is not usual for the Deva evolution to be summoned to meet opposing and destructive forces, to find conflict and combat in their work. Yet all these things are happening upon this planet, and therefore Devas too are taking on characteristics which normally do not belong to their point of development. The work of the Devas is to draw to the planet certain solar and interplanetary forces for storage in great reservoirs, and for the distribution to the kingdoms of nature. They keep active the flow of the life forces through the planes and between sphere and sphere. They are the lifeblood of the inner worlds and carry the pranic currents into all parts of the cosmic organism. The Devas correspond to the white corpuscles, the mass of humanity to the red. The Devas function in caring for the well-being of the planet as a whole, acting under direct orders, like the sympathetic system, and fulfilling their mission, one might say, involuntary. Man corresponds to the cerebral spinal system and to the red cells, and acts under conscious impulse for the uses he plans for the body. Evolution in both the animal and plant kingdoms depends upon the interposition of man and his intelligent direction and analysis. It is sometimes thought that the Devas are only here to supervise certain phases of the kingdoms of nature. But Devas live just as humans live, and their duties are merely activities incidental to that living. They have their birth, growth, and death, just as plants, animals, and humans do, but not fraught with such pain as in human life, but the definite periods nonetheless. Where Devas choose their habitat and roam, there grows beauty. Their nature manifests itself in transcendent form, in deep woods, near running streams, in wide meadows, flowers strewn on stern mountain slopes, majestic in form. In gardens bursting with color, there dwell Devas. And their presence is made almost tangible by a particular quality of life in which they dwell, a sense of peace, or of leaping joy, or of tranquil delight that seems to greet one like a presence or voice. There is a closer connection between the inner and outer worlds than many realize. Therefore, a great mountain here corresponds to a center of power in the inner worlds. It is the outward and manifest form of an inner reality. And it is only through the gateway of the physical life that ultimate salvation and achievement can be reached. The Devas who help many humans also help the nature kingdoms, which have been established to guard the growth of beauty upon the earth. These little people are friendly and help all who turn to them in friendly spirit and who show little of the demonic influence. Rivers have a mighty consciousness, just like great Devas. The lord of a mighty river is a very potent being, usually beneficent and friendly, but capable of being roused by warfare or turmoil into a human menace.
Facebook.
Water is a great purifier and cleanser, and the large rivers are swarming with nature spirits and fairy folk, and Devas who carry joy and cleanliness and well-being to the people along the riverbanks. No wonder natives of all countries love their rivers. They are the milk of the mother of the world, poured out for their benefit. Running water and fresh water have a peculiar quality of their own. They are almost the essence of spiritual beneficence, of healing and purifying powers. They feed, nourish, and sustain all of life, and are filled alike with physical prana and spiritual stimulation. Much is yet unknown about the play of finer forces through a human body, such as magnetism, vitality, and blood circulation. But in time, these things will become clear as man adds to his power of sight and thought. The angels of fire do not descend to the physical plane. They contact only the mental plane and pass their power over the Antakarana to form the link between the lower and higher self. At initiation, they are invoked to widen the slender bridge which was made at individualization. They represent the true creative fire. Behind the aspects of fire lie many powers which are most potent on the inner planes, but less suited to the physical and emotional. Pure flame finally purifies the lower vehicles of all dross, but until that purification is accomplished, one cannot enter the gate of initiation. The inner flame plays a great part in the evolution of consciousness. Cold flame or crystallized flame is electricity, and this is used to rarefy the bodies in preparation to the initiatory process. As humans evolve, so do the elementals within us, and when we pass out of the human kingdom, our own elementals graduate and become devas, or angels in the West. Though just as man has taken on some part of the demonic nature, so too the devas have taken on some part of the human nature. Oddly, sacrifice has been the long-used tool to periodically keep the demonic thirst for blood in check. The bread and wine of the sacrament is indeed a symbol of the body and blood in which Jesus offered to appease the wrath of the demonic forces. This may shed light on why Jesus is said to have shown compassion for the demons. Again and again, in ancient legends and myths, appeasement has been temporarily wrestled from the demons for the sake of survival of the race by actual living sacrifice. Odin sacrificed an eye, Prometheus was a constant sacrifice, even the legends of Andromeda in Greek culture, and the human sacrifices endured by the Aztecs and Mayans during religious rituals. And of course, the holy sacrifice of Jesus himself, which was both for his own personal soul growth, but also a sacrifice for all humanity. Curiously, sacrifice within certain intense periods may have temporarily kept down the destructive forces of the evil ones. Temporarily, that is. It is by no means a lasting cure. The true cure will be the ascension and overall evolution of consciousness by humanity when Earth becomes a sacred planet, having reached full harmony within the music of the spheres. Balance is always necessary in every solar system. There must be stability, rhythm, and activity. 3 types of force: negative, positive, and balanced. And therefore there must be abodes of demons, devas, and humans in all systems. Demons are positive force, devas negative, and humans balanced. Demons destructive, devas constructive, and humans using both as need arises, and therefore increasingly intelligent directors and masters of both. But it is needful and customary to keep them separated, and not as here all admixed. So when one asks the question, why is there so much evil in the world? How could a loving God allow such horror in his creation? God did not bring this upon man. Man brought this evil upon himself by his own actions, and still to this day the karma is being reconciled. Planetary karma, national karma, and individual karma is brought about by cause and effect. The beauty of this realization is that we are co-creators within creation, and can therefore create harmony or discord. Yet the goal for all planetary evolution is to transform the lower nature of matter into a reflection of the higher light of the soul, or to spiritualize matter by becoming a clear, radiant vessel for the countless incarnations of the one Spirit.
In the realms of God Almighty, where the stars are scattered sheep, rolls the mighty winds of cosmos through the vaults of star-filled deep. On the highways of the system, golden trails from star to star, travel lords from every kingdom, seeking wisdom near and far. Seeking in the realms of others, rulers of the star or sun, knowledge how to help their people where the work is better done. In their travels long and tedious came they to this planet Earth, saw in grief amazed the sorrow dwelling here on every earth. So they sent to lofty rulers pleas for help for Earth's release, seeking in the vaulted heavens means of aid to bring men peace. Through the worlds the answer echoed to the waiting lords of light. If men's souls will follow guidance, we will help to lead them right. Now there comes the great salvation, if men's hearts shall answer true. Peace on earth to every nation and to every soul wisdom.
and the purpose of the plan diverted, certain cosmic adjustments were necessary, and certain members of the solar scheme were called upon for special service and assistance. Of those who volunteered, Venus, as its wisest souls, proved in this period to be the most useful, and into their hands was placed the governance of the planet, after a specified point of evolution. There is a special relationship between Venus and the Earth, for Venus has become the foster mother, and Earth the foster child. Furthermore, Earth is carrying out on a lower level and in more difficult conditions. Venus evolves through love, brotherly love. Earth evolves through passion, sex love. Venus achieves through wisdom, where Earth can only achieve through intelligence, the lower phase of wisdom. There is ever a struggle going on between Venus and the play of forces of wisdom and aspiration, which should have been the line of man's evolution, and Saturn, into whose kingdom the world of material man fell. Symbology has been much confused. Saturn rules dense form, and when man fell into his kingdom by error, he came under strange laws not suited to his nature. Sex love became materialistic, no longer a communion of souls, with the resulting uplift and service which comes from the interplay of spiritual love, but lapsed into an animal-like struggle for supremacy and a driving and intolerable physical urge that often brutalizes and degrades. This is the influence of Saturn working upon forces that do not belong to this realm. Suffice it for our purpose to say that in the middle of the Lemurian epoch, approximately 18 million years ago, occurred a great event which signified, among other things, the following developments. The planetary logos of our Earth scheme, one of the 7 spirits before the throne, took physical incarnation, and under the form of Sanat Kumara, the Ancient of Days and the Lord of the World, came down to this dense physical planet from Venus, and has remained with us ever since, although he himself operates in his etheric body. He is the greatest of all a center in the Gobi Desert, called in the ancient books the White Island. It exists in etheric matter, and when the race of men on Earth have developed etheric vision, its location will be recognized and its reality admitted. When the fourth or human kingdom came into being, a self-conscious or rational unit, man, began his career. In Lemurian days, after the great descent of the spiritual existences to the earth, the work they planned to do was systematized, offices were apportioned, and the processes of evolution in all the departments of nature were brought under the conscious, wise guidance of this initial brotherhood. For ages after its immediate founding, the work was slow and discouraging. Thousands of years came and went, and the races of men appeared and disappeared from the earth before it was possible to delegate even the work done by initiates of the first degree to the evolving sons of men. But in the middle of the fourth root race, the Atlantean, an event occurred which necessitated a change or innovation in the hierarchical method. Certain of his members were called away to higher work elsewhere in the solar system, and this brought in, through necessity, a number of highly evolved units of the human family. In order to enable others to take their place, the lesser members of the hierarchy were all moved up a step, leaving vacancies among the minor posts. Therefore, three things were decided upon in the council chamber of the Lord of the World. 1. To close the door through which animal men passed into the human kingdom. 2. To open another door and permit members of the human family who were willing to undergo the necessary discipline and to make the required stupendous effort to enter the fifth or spiritual kingdom. In this way, the ranks of the hierarchy could be filled by the members of Earth's humanity who qualified. This door is called the Portal of Initiation, and still remains open upon the same terms as laid down by the Lord of the World in Atlantean days. Three. It was also decided to make the line of demarcation between the two forces of matter and spirit clearly defined. The inherent duality of all manifestation was emphasized, with the aim in view of teaching men how to liberate themselves from the limitations of the fourth or human kingdom, and thus pass on into the fifth or spiritual kingdom. With the coming of new forces into this planet, the bloom of the flower of humanity will be much hastened. Up to this time has been witnessed only the preparation of the soil, the darker, the fertilization through blood and anguish, and always the deep burial of the bulb and root of spiritual things beneath the dark surface of human life. Yet now, with the new forces of the sun, as in a greenhouse, soon the first green shafts of the planet itself appear, promise of the spiritual flower which is to come. But the bloom itself will be upon the inner planes of spirit, in the finer bodies of humanity, but the root must draw its life essence and sustenance from the soil of the earth, from the dense physical body of man. Man's kingdom is indeed in the inner worlds, but it can be won only as he sends his roots deep into the soil of human life, grips it firmly, and then reaches from that firm base upward to the spiritual sun, so that he shall at last burst forth in the full bloom of divine glory. That glory shall be the flowering of the soul, and the fragrance shall permeate all human life. For mankind will soon know the reality of human incarnation and adjust the physical life to center his consciousness in the realms of spirit, where blooms the flower of the soul.
The beauty of wisdom lies in the eternity of truth. Wisdom is simple. Truth is simple. Law is simple. Complexity comes only in variety of expression, in confusion of manifestation, like the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle looked at separately. Yet, when once united into a whole, the theme is clear and confusion disappears. So it is with life. When consciousness can span a great enough arc of time, the plan becomes clear. It is only the narrow limits of a finite mind grappling with a tiny segment of history that causes confusion. Wisdom is closely associated with beauty. Intellect consists of the grasp of component parts. Wisdom is the vision which comes from uniting them and finding beauty.
The final remnants of Atlantis were destroyed, and the remaining survivors, who, knowing their doom, traveled to all corners of the world and settled down in what became ancient Egypt, the Mayans, and the Druid cultures. The fifth root race came into being, or our present humanity began its evolution, thus bringing us to the present day and a new hope for tomorrow. Man is now completing the development of his mind, and the intellect is now becoming intuition. The coming times will bring us many significant changes in all aspects of life. All ancient texts and religions speak of a golden age that lay before us in the coming future. This will be able to manifest because the forces of light have finally overcome the forces of darkness. Battles still linger, but the war has been won, though our future is still based on the choices we make through the law of free will. The Masters have not walked openly among men since those ancient days of Atlantis. However, it's important to note that the ruling Masters of early Atlantis and before were not of human origin. Only later was mankind able to step up to the divine and become guiding forces of light. In the starry vaults of heaven are many types of solar systems, with varying humanities. Some trained for one purpose, some for another. There is therefore in any given planet a dominating character, a typical major force to which all others subordinate. And power can only be transferred from one to another, where there is similarity of major vibrations. Some systems specialize in love, others power, some in intelligence, corresponding to the varieties of development along the rays in our own system. This planet seems to be seeking a balance of the three. Venus specializes in pure reason, in wisdom, a blend of love and intelligence. Mars is power only. Jupiter, love exclusively. Evolution on Mars is swift and terrible and painful. On Jupiter, it is pleasant, but very.
The neutrino light detectors allow us to